Hey guys, I am in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. I'm right on the edge of the Gettysburg National Battlefield. This, of course, is the famous Civil War battlefield. I apologize for the wind. It's very cold, very windy today. I'm gonna just take you around and show you some of the battlefield, well, most of it. This is a battle that turned the point. It was the turning point of the Civil War. Over 50,000 people died. In 3 days, and it all happened right here on this very small piece of land. So I'm gonna go around, show you some of the monuments, some of the little points that are just really cool. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. I enjoy American history. I enjoy Civil War history specifically. I've been to this battlefield a couple of times, and I always like coming back here because it's different from a lot of the other battlefields in the sense that history seems to have stopped here right after it. It's like you feel something major happened here. I don't know how else to describe that feeling, but every time I come here, I feel it. So I just wanted to bring you guys along and show you some of the high points of it for sure. We're going to see the little round tops and little round top and the big round top, and just some of the different points. And I'm going to try to do some aerial photography. I'm pretty excited to show it to you. So let's travel.
I'm Chris Bauer, and I am an art slinger. I travel around the U.S. selling artwork at comic and anime conventions, and while I'm there, I like to check out cool sites, eat great food, and see all the places my favorite movies and TV shows are made. Welcome to Sets, Streets, and Eats.
And just to give you a brief overview of Gettysburg, the Battle of Gettysburg happened July 1st through 3rd, 1863. It happened in southern Pennsylvania in the town of Gettysburg. General Lee of the rebels, the Confederate Army, he had marched his army north. He had about 75,000 men. He wanted to strike a major blow in the north against the Union Army and decided to invade the north. So this was his way of doing it. They didn't mean to meet here at Gettysburg. He was trying to get farther north, Lee was, but George Meade, who was just put in charge of the Union Army 3 days before Gettysburg, by the way, intercepted him at Gettysburg, just south of it. Well, the cavalry intercepted, Union cavalry intercepted a band of the Confederate Army just east or west of Gettysburg on the first day. And that started the skirmish. The Union Army hadn't got all the way in to Gettysburg on the first day yet, so the Confederates were able to push back and take Gettysburg the first day. They took the town of Gettysburg, and the Union pushed back to the south of town onto the high ground, which obviously was very pivotal for their win. So I am on what's known as Little Big Top. Little Big Top is a hill that is right next to Big Top. Big Round Top, sorry. And this is Little Round Top, I apologize. Anyway, so this is at the bottom of the Union line, the fishhook line as they call it. This was at the bottom. After the first day when they got pushed out of Gettysburg, these two hills, these two majorly high points, were not taken yet. And so on the second day, on July 2nd of 1863, Colonel Chamberlain, a Union colonel, was ordered by Meade to defend this left flank. This would have been the left flank of the Union Army. It was also on this side of the hill less steep than the other hillsides, so it was a very likely point that the Confederates would try to go up it, and they definitely did. If you've ever want to imagine what that battle is like, they do a great job in the movie Gettysburg that they made back, I think, at the early 90s. Jeff Daniels plays Chamberlain, and it kind of goes over all of his choices he had to make, and rough as they were, going from running out of ammunition and having to basically have everyone go hand to hand with bayonets and whatever you had to keep the rebels off of the hillside. It was successful, and he would later go on to win the Congressional Medal of Honor for it. So, but they have a monument to him down in here. They have another monument to their regiment. I think it was their regiment. It was the 20th Maine Regiment, right across from here as well. But we are on the left side of Little Round Top. That can get a little confusing. Anyway, but it's a very cool part of history. This hillside would have been a major conflict on the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg. Thousands of men would have been dead down here, which is pretty amazing. And it's a very interesting and very pivotal part of the battle, because if Chamberlain had failed and the rebels had gotten on this, they would have had a direct line down onto the rest of the, or at least most of the middle of the Union line, and that would have left just Culp Hill on the other end of the fishhook to protect, and there's a very good chance that the Confederacy would have won that battle. So this part of the battle, the second day, this part was one of the most pivotal points. Golly jeez. But that wind, it cuts through your entire body. Is it normal not to be able to feel your fingers? But looking out over the battlefield, you can see why, of course, this hill was definitely part of the advantage. And this whole ridgeline honestly was. You can see the whole valley from here. And they could see, except for what was in the forest, they could see where the Confederates were coming from. So it made perfect sense to be up here. And honestly, won the battle for them because of it. So I'm standing in Devil's Den. Devil's Den is at the base of Little Round Top. Kind of in between Little Round Top and Big Round Top. Sorry, I'm out of breath. What we call out of shape, so walking, 5 feet elevated is strenuous. Anyway, this was a section of rocks with lots of crevices. As you can see, I'm standing in one big one where the Union had it first, but during the battle on the morning of the second day, they lost it 2 or 3 times. It exchanged hands a couple of times, but it ended up being a Confederate win for the second day. The reason this position was important for the Confederacy was they were able to position sharpshooters in these rocks to shoot up at Little Round Top to help as their boys stormed the hill, trying to get on top of it. And this was also a retreat point for them. It was well fortified, had plenty of cover, and as you can imagine, if you're in the middle of a war, it's kind of a nice spot to hide behind. as many of those young men did. Anyway, it's got a cool name, so it became kind of a very touristy part of the battlefield after and later years after the battle. So I think the really neat part about Gettysburg and many of the Civil War battlefields is because this was such a big deal, they almost immediately made it into a national historical site. So it's remained completely and mostly untouched from the way it looked when the battle happened, which is really neat. It's rare that happens. So when you're going through these rocks and all of that stuff, I mean, that's how it looked during the battle. That's what these guys really hid behind and hid in and nursed their wounds and all that. It's just a really powerful thing to see. As you can see, Little Round Top is right there. This is Devil's Den. This was a very good spot to have for the Confederate Army. So behind me is the site of a very, very famous photograph. There was two photographers. Sorry, I'll put their names at the bottom. I don't remember their names right now, but they showed up in a few days after the battle, and they went around, and as you can imagine, there was bodies everywhere still. It took them weeks and months to get them all buried, but they went around and took photographs of the battlefield. It was some of the first that people had actually seen. It really brought the gruesomeness of it home. But this is one of the most famous photographs. I'll put a still of it up to show you. But the soldier is dead. It was a sharpshooter, and he's laying right there after he had built this this fortified little spot. A lot of speculation that people have, or that people had staged it, they had dragged the body there, because there is another photograph of another body that's dressed just like him. And you can't really see his face, but that was in another part of the battlefield for another photograph. So I don't know. I mean, it's not crazy to think that there was two Confederate soldiers wearing the same thing, even though most of them didn't wear uniforms, or at least didn't have complete uniforms. So, but either way, it's a very famous Civil War photograph taken right here. of my favorite things about Gettysburg is how a lot of the original homes that were surrounding the battlefield are still here today. And they look very close to what they did at the time, if not right on it. It's really amazing. This was the top end, at least for a little bit, of the Confederates' position right in Gettysburg. This is on what's now called Confederate Avenue, because it basically goes right down the line of where the Confederates were dug in. That was the McMillan House. And from this position, they were basically sending their attacks, including the infamous Pickett's Charge. It's actually said that there was over 600 cannons used in the Battle of Gettysburg. Think about that. Imagine the noise from 600 cannons. God, it's a wonder any of those guys had ears left after that. Especially during the artillery pummeling right before Pickett's Charge. This is the North Carolina Monument. You can actually see the Cadore farm out there, the big red barn. That's the famous halfway point during Pickett's Charge. And that farm is featured in that large painting, very famous painting of the Battle of Gettysburg. You can see it on the battlefield of Pickett's Charge. That would have been something else to be sitting in that house while that battle was happening. Probably a bit dangerous. This is the Virginia Monument. Which, of course, led Pickett's Charge. Lee is mounted on his famed horse Traveler on the top. So on the day of Pickett's Charge, these woods were filled with Confederate soldiers waiting while the artillery out in front of the woods just hammered the Union position in the middle of the Union line on Cemetery Hill. Hammered and hammered them from hours. And they waited and waited until George Pickett ordered them to march the mile of open ground in between the Confederate and Union positions. The Mississippi Monument to the Sons of Mississippi. So this is around the southern tip. We're going to be going all the way around the bottom of Big Top and Little Round Top, or Big Round Top and Little Round Top. So what I'm going to be going past now is basically the Union positions, the Army of the Potomac. This was their high ground positions from the end of the first day till the end of the third day, when the battle pretty much ended. Obviously, at certain points of these positions, they were pushed back and then regained, or pushed back completely. But for the most part, the key to the Union Army's success at Gettysburg was this position. Being able to have that high ground, to see what was coming, see what was being organized. And Lee just made a misjudgment on how hard these positions would be to take. They, of course, knew they were hard positions to take, but I think he believed his army's enthusiasm and momentum that he perceived after the previous battle he had won in May. I can't remember the name of the battle off the top of my head. Again, I am not a Civil War expert by any stretch of the imagination, so this is just my own novice, hobbyist enjoyment of world history, American history, and Civil War history. So right now the Pennsylvania Monument is under renovation. At least I think that's what the fence is for. Could just be our current climate politically. I don't know. So this is where the decisive part of the Battle of Gettysburg took place, which is Pickett's charge. So this is the center of the Union line. Down this direction were both the little and big tops, big round tops, big round top, little round top. That's that hill back there. That was the southernmost Union position, the end of the high ground, so to speak. And then this was right at the fish hook is farther up behind me. Culp Hill, I forget the name of all this ridge line had different names. We're in, I believe it's Cemetery Ridge right now. Anyway, this was the Union position. And of course, the Confederate position was that tree line about a mile away over there. And George Pickett, under the command of General Longstreet, who was, of course, Lee's right-hand general, basically. Lee decided to try and break up the two high points. They'd been fighting for 2 days, trying to get up Culp Hill and the round tops and trying to get the Union position off of there, but they couldn't do it. So the thinnest position the Union had was this middle position, their artillery position on Cemetery Hill. And Lee decided that they would start by pulverizing this position with artillery to try and get most of the guns off this ridge. Sorry for the wind. It's so cold today. And on the morning of July 3rd, that's what they did. They pulverized it for hours, just kept shooting cannon fire after cannon fire, just destroying this area. But the Union had plenty. And by afternoon, Lee had decided it was enough and had George Pickett start his charge. And what was so brutal about that was this area you see behind me is in a valley. We're on the high ground where the Union had it. They could see all of them, and they stretched in a thin line, all the soldiers, for about a mile, infantry after infantry. And they sent them across that valley. And they, for over a mile, were in basically open season. Like, everyone could see them, they could get shot at, the artillery was hitting them. And they had 15,000 men that strode across that valley, and almost 10,000 of them were killed. It was an absolute brutal massacre, and a bad decision on Lee's part, which some people have, there's been reports that Lee had a heart attack either July 1st or 2nd, and that could have been part of why his decision making was flawed, because Lee was a brilliant strategist, and but he made a flaw that day and sent his men out there. But Pickett's men were diehard Virginians. They were there to win the war, and they fought very bravely. And by the time they actually made it all the way across, and by the time they got over here for the hand-to-hand combat, there was so many Union soldiers that they had to fight, but they afterwards would write about how much respect they had for those men to cross that valley in the onslaught of absolute brutality, watching everything go on around them, and they kept fighting, which I think goes to the American spirit. The reason they say Gettysburg is so important battle-wise, because obviously the war went on for 2 more years after it. This happened in July of '63. Is because this was the last attempt that Lee made to invade the North. He had tried once before. This was his second and last attempt. And basically, after Gettysburg, the Southern Army was always on, the rebels were always on the defensive as opposed to the offensive. So it just finally, for almost 2 years after, it kept going, but finally it was decided in spring of 1865. So this battle truly did break the spirit, so to speak. Took a while, but this battle truly hurt the South. But both sides suffered insane casualties. The Confederates lost they had at least 28,000 casualties here at this battle, but the Union had almost 23,000. That's, over 50,000 people died in this field. That's unbelievable. Or mortally wounded, by the way. That wasn't all deaths. Casualties applies to deaths and mortally wounded and missing. They call that a casualty because they went missing. A lot of those guys may have ran off, but they also may have been disintegrated by this artillery fire. These cannons were going right through their ranks. It was pretty gruesome. The bodies, it took weeks and months to bury all the bodies. And it was a very brutal battle, the bloodiest in American history, and it all happened right here. So when President Lincoln came in to Gettysburg to help inaugurate the first national cemetery for the soldiers, it was in November of '63, so it was many months after the battle. He got off the train and then came straight here to David Will's house. The governor met him there. But the important event that happened here was he went upstairs, took a few minutes, and finished his remarks. And those remarks would become the most famous speech in American history, and that's the Gettysburg Address. And he finished it right up in one of those rooms right above me. It's a really important address. It really kind of got to the root of what America is supposed to be. Martin Luther King referenced it in his I Have a Dream speech, which is also one of the most important ones. Very short, but very concise and very important to the American dream.